Number 1. I was driving to work on a Saturday morning down the interstate. I was in the middle lane and I glanced into my side mirror and noticed a car catching up to me pretty quickly. I looked over as it passed me, and in the back of this coupe was a lady banging on the window screaming for help. I sped up to them and she noticed me and started screaming yet again. I got behind them and started following them and could see a man reaching back and hitting her. I called 911 and as I was, he sped off. As I was talking to dispatch, I caught up with him and he noticed me and realized I was following him. He moved over in front of me and came to a complete stop. At that point, I didn't know if he had a gun or what, so I went around him and exited. Once he went past the overpass, I got back on and followed him, but he eventually lost me as I couldn't keep up. Fortunately, I was on the phone with 911 the entire time, and they had cops ready to pull him over. Eventually, they got him to pull over, and when I passed them, he was handcuffed on the ground, and she was sitting there. Come to find out, it was his ex and he abducted her and was taking her to God knows where. I followed them for around 30 miles, weaving in and out of traffic and going 100 miles per hour at times to keep up. Definitely creepy thinking of what he was maybe preparing to do to her. Number 2. One early morning around 6 a.m., I was driving with a friend on the highway in the twists and turns of a mountain valley. We were just having a casual chat in the car. Nobody was on the highway at that time of day, and even less on this part of the highway. I took a quick peek in the rearview mirror and saw a car coming not fast, but fast. I tell my friend to watch out for the oncoming car because I thought they were coming way too fast and they weren't changing lanes to pass us over. At the very last moment, my friend kind of swerved a little toward the right of the lane, and the car behind us hard swerved towards the ditch. The car disappeared in the deep ditch and then reappeared, jumping about 4 to 5 feet in the air towards the highway, at about 100 kilometers with the momentum, and back on the highway it was. Like it was nothing, the driver sped up, and we lose him ahead of us, as he was going about 140 kilometers after the near-death accident. We were absolutely shocked and couldn't say a word for like 2 to 3 minutes. We assumed the driver fell asleep and at the last second saw he was going to ram us and swerve toward the ditch. Shock probably made him speed up after the impact. It was crazy surreal because there was nobody else for miles around even after that. Number 3. I saw a dude jumping in front of vehicles on the highway a couple of years ago. The cops were called, but the dude screwed off before they got there. They didn't look too hard for him. I think he was hiding in the ditch. Well, fast forward a few hours later. It's nighttime. My friend is driving his family into town for dinner, and this crazy guy leaps out in front of him just as another car was coming in the opposite direction, dazzling my friend with the headlights so he didn't see the guy slip out of the ditch. Needless to say, he hit him at 100 kilometers per hour. Smeared him all over the highway, and my friend is freaking suffering the worst PTSD to this day. It's unsettling to think that I saw that dude attempting to kill himself earlier that very day, and barely anything was done to make an effort to catch him and get him some help. It's really sad. Number 4. My mom honked at a guy in a massive pickup truck once because he was drifting into our lane. Well, he didn't like that. He sped up and rammed into our minivan from the side, which sent us into a tailspin towards the rail on the side of the highway. The other side was a 30-foot drop. We hit another car and sent them flying towards the edge as well. The officer who was investigating the incident said that if she hadn't slammed on the brakes when she did, we would have gone flying over the edge. The other car ended up okay too. Nobody was seriously injured physically, although my mom had panic attacks for months. It turns out the truck driver was on drugs. I will never honk at anyone on the highway for as long as I live. Number 5. In rural East Texas, I was driving through some very thick fog on a back road. Like so thick I could only go about 25 miles per hour since I could barely see the road in front of me. An important part of this story is that I was driving an old pickup truck. After creeping forward down the road for a good while and being scared of my mind, I got the feeling that I could see the outline of something up ahead and I should slow down more and try to move to the side of the road. As I got closer, I could tell that the outline I saw was a dead hog, but it was one of the biggest hogs I'd ever seen. Easily 400 pounds, but then it started to move. It lurched to the side of the road a few times like it was being dragged by something. I thought, wow, that's a strong person. Should I help them move it so no one gets in a wreck? But before I stopped my truck completely and got out, the thing that was moving this 400-pound hog stood up. I then found myself eye level with the largest dog I've ever seen in my life. This dog stood looking at me directly in the eyes while I sat in the driver's seat of an old Chevy truck. I've honestly never seen anything this big before in my life and wasn't sure if this was a farm dog or a damn werewolf. Not only was it shockingly tall, it had the mass and strength to drag a behemoth by itself. It had shaggy white fur, so it reminded me of a Pyrenees, but it was easily 1.5 times the height. It took us probably 15 seconds of shock of staring before I said screw it and rocketed out of there. After I got home, I thought about it. Dang, not only was that a monster, but it was smart enough to move the hog off the road before eating it? I'm convinced to this day it was some East Texas old god. But whatever it really was, it's one of the creepiest things I've ever come across in my life. Number 6. I had just finished university for Christmas break, but I couldn't get a ride back until Christmas Eve. My stepdad drove 2 hours to pick me up at 6 a.m. so we could be home for around 8 or 9 for a family event. Of course, we didn't know we wouldn't make it. The roads were fairly dead. It was winter, so sunlight was scarcely present, but it was light enough for me to spot something incredibly pale sticking out of a garbage bag on the side of the road. I thought to myself, was that a human freaking leg? And my suspicion was soon backed up by my stepdad's. Did you see that? Did that look like a leg to you? As I said, the roads weren't very busy at all, and with it being the earliest time of day in known history and Christmas Eve, we actually pulled over and reversed down the motorway just enough to be able to see it. Couldn't make out what it was from where we sat, so my stepdad, who insisted I stay put in case there was a psycho out on the loose, got out to take a look. He confirmed it. It was a human leg on the side of the road. All kinds of different thoughts passed through our minds. Was it an accident? Was there a cannibal one drumstick short for Christmas dinner? We called the police, who got to the scene faster than I thought possible and began asking questions. They sent us on our way eventually, and for days afterwards we couldn't find anything in the news about it. It wasn't until a month later that they called my stepdad to follow up and confirm that foul play was ruled out, but that leaves more questions than answers really. My stepdad thinks maybe it was a medical waste truck that may have had the locks malfunction on its doors based on the appearance of the bag, but I can't imagine how that would go unnoticed. Number 7. My wife and I were driving to work. It was a couple of days from Halloween. While we were driving, a lady just stumbled out of the wooded grove. She was covered in blood. At first, I thought it was just a costume and told my wife to look. Instantly, my wife's face turned white, and that's not a costume. The lady collapsed and my wife pulls over. She jumps out of the car and runs probably 450 feet to the lady on the ground. Me, seeing every horror movie out there in existence, starts to scan the area, making sure the person who did something isn't still out there. My wife starts screaming, "Caleb, bring some water now!" I was scared. Lots of school shootings and LV shootings were in my mind, so I slowly made my way. She screamed for me to hurry up, so I started to jog, and by a truck in the woods was a body. It was just laying there. Soon afterwards, others had stopped and started helping, and 15 minutes later an ambulance arrived. Turns out she was shot 2 times in the chest, once in the stomach. The guy by the truck was headshotted and died instantly. They were trying to grow marijuana and had their farm robbed. She was in the ICU for 3 weeks but made a recovery. They said that if my wife didn't keep the pressure on her chest, she would have died. We still went to work that day. Number 8. I had traveled about 5 hours to attend a family event. Lots of people I hadn't seen for 20 plus years. I had my 5-year-old son with me, but my husband had to stay home because of work. Crazy drunk / stoned hippie aunt came up and said, "I see an owl on your shoulder protecting you. Okay, love, see you again in another 20 years. Lay off the bong." Driving home, it's about 2 a.m. in the middle of nowhere, still probably 2 hours away from home. Kids asleep in the back, and I start to have little danger naps, so I pull over at a rest stop, thinking I'll jump out and have a quick cigarette and get back to it. I get out of the car, and just standing there for a meter from my door is a big white barn owl. What the heck? I have my smoke while this thing just stares at me, not even blinking. Amazing. I get back in the car and decide to have a quick sleep before I start driving again. Okay. Better safe than sorry. Maybe the owl is trying to tell me something. Maybe it's 2 a.m. and I'm being delirious. About a half hour later, I woke up to this terrible banging, scratching noise. I open my eyes and see this owl on my car right in front of me, and it's jumping up and down and flapping its wings and banging into the car and windshield. Okay, what the heck's going on? I go to get out of the car to shoo it away, and when I look out of my window, there's a man, right there staring at me through the window, smoking a cigarette. I still don't understand how it happened so quickly, but I just locked the door, started the car, and started to back out of my parking spot. The man jumped at the car, trying to open my door and punching at the window. I just drove out of there as fast as I could and sped down the highway until the adrenaline finally wore off. I then pulled up and had a bit of a cry and realized I could call the police. Nothing ever came of it, and they never found the man, and I think they thought I was a bit insane anyway. As if there was really a strange man in the middle of nowhere in the middle of night. I was probably just dreaming, overtired, imagining things. I'll forever be grateful to that big white barn owl though. That owl might have just saved my life. Who knows? Number 9. I told this story a while ago on another thread. But there was this one time I was driving with my girlfriend through Wisconsin on the way back home. It was really late, like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I stopped at a gas station to fill up. My GPS ended up putting me on a small highway instead of the expressway right away after leaving there, but I didn't want to complicate things more, so I just followed it. My girlfriend was sleeping, so I had the radio off and drove in silence on this really dark, creepy highway. There were deer crossing signs, so I was driving extra cautious because a family friend had recently hit a deer in their truck, which did quite a number on it and also caused her to break her arm from the impact. I saw there was a pretty sharp curve coming up, so I slowed down to make it carefully, and as I'm turning, I see a figure exiting the darkness of the woods. Turns out it's a large mountain lion with blood stained all over the front of its face. Scared the crap out of me. I pulled up just after the turn and tried to wake up my girlfriend. I could see its large shadow make its way across the road in my rearview mirror, but by the time my girlfriend woke up, it was gone. She had lived in Wisconsin most of her life and immediately dismissed my claims that it was a mountain lion because they're not really from that area. I told her I know what I saw, but she insisted that I was seeing things. I acted like she was probably right and continued the trip back, but I know what I saw. Number 10. Me and my 2 buddies are driving back from Colorado in the middle of the night when we see a blue truck pulled over on the side of the interstate. It's pitch black, nothing for miles, and there's a girl standing out in the road. The girl comes up and starts explaining that she ran out of gas. Now, maybe I'm a bastard for thinking this, but when people start to interject God into what should be normal conversations, my bullcrap meter starts going off. Every sentence contains some kind of reference, and she must have blessed us 15 times. Then we realize she's standing there holding a big gas tank. Now, I'm sure some people have gas tanks in their truck, but I've never seen anyone drive around with one. So it came across to me like she had done this before and the gas tank was like a prop. However, the last thing that really made it creepy was as the conversation was wrapping up, I happened to notice a flash of light in the truck. When I asked her what it was, she said it was her boyfriend. There was no mention of the boyfriend before, and who sends their girl to go stand in the middle of the interstate at night? So we're a bit weirded out, but we end up taking the gas tank and filling it up, and start looking for a cop to tell him where they broke down and have him deliver the gas. Wouldn't you know it, when you want to find one, there's no cops in sight. So we end up driving back there, but past them a bit. The girl started running up to us, but we didn't want to risk getting jumped or something. So I opened the passenger door, set the gas on the side of the interstate, and we peeled off, never to be seen again. Number 11. This happened to me in Brisbane, Australia. I was driving home with some friends in the car, and we saw this guy dressed like the Invisible Man, impossibly tall and very thin, head and hands completely wrapped in bandages, wearing a trench coat and a fedora-type hat, just walking down the middle of a busy motorway. As we drove by, he moved his head to follow our car, but we couldn't see that there was any way for him to see through the bandages. We absolutely crapped ourselves and started yelling at each other, terrified. So I decided to pull onto a side street and turn around to get back on the main road and try to get another look at him. But literally 20 seconds after we first saw him, he was gone. We started to drive home again, all wondering what the heck just happened. And as we turned into our little street in a neighborhood that was like a labyrinth on a hill, my heart sank as I see this towering, freaky guy walking towards us on our freaking street. Not only was it terrifying to see that he had watched us drive by and had somehow ended up on our street, but from the initial sighting to home was about 4 kilometers, and he had made that distance on foot in about 7 minutes. We kept driving around for hours that night, too scared to go home, and eventually when we did, there was no sight of him. So we locked every door and window and smoked a million cigarettes while sitting with the makeshift weapons in the living room all night. I still don't have any explanation for it, and no one else I've spoken to has ever seen this kind of thing. We lived right near one of the largest cemeteries in the country, and strange folk hung out around there, but this guy was too tall and too freaky to be a real human, I feel. I didn't feel safe in that neighborhood for a long time after that, and I moved as soon as I could.
Number 12. This night occurred about 7 years ago on my way home from my parents. I was 22, young, naive, and well, dumb. I had just moved into my first apartment. I was the first of my family to move away from our sleepy old train town that I grew up in. So I went home every Sunday to visit with the family, but mostly to do laundry and eat Sunday dinner. I lived about 45-60 minutes up the highway, so I generally headed home by 6. On this night in particular, there was a summer thunderstorm that had been pouring down rain relentlessly all day long. My cousins dropped in just as I was packing up to leave after dinner, so I ended up sticking around for a few more hours to visit. I left my mom's around 10 p.m. in the pouring rain, and this was the first time after moving from home that I encountered something that truly scared me. I don't know why I never told anyone about this. I think it had to do with pride. Everyone always gave me trouble about living alone as a single female in a newish area. Anyway, here it goes. I left my parents around 10 p.m. in the pouring rain. Side note, I hate driving in the rain. So I'm driving down the service road that leads out of town and eventually turns into the on-ramp to the highway. As you're leaving town, the service road turns into one lane right in front of this quarry train loading station thing. I'm not really clear on what that place is. It always gave me the creeps. If you're unfortunate enough to pass through when a train is crossing the road to load, you'll be stuck there a while. Once the road passes the tracks, it turns back into 2 lanes and goes up a steep hill. As I'm approaching the quarry, I can make out the orange lights on a red cab 18-wheeler sitting in the quarry parking lot. Mind you, it's pouring rain, visibility is low, so I can't make out the trucker until I'm pretty close to him. As soon as I could make out it was a trucker, it pulls out into the road. I had to slam on my brakes to avoid hitting the trailer on the back of the truck. I skid around on the road until I regain control of the car. Thanks for the driver's ed classes, Mom. So now I'm stuck behind this dummy that just pulled out without paying attention. I keep my distance behind him because I'm a little flustered. For the record, my headlights were on, so if he had been paying attention, he should have been able to see me. Honestly, with the heavy rain and low visibility, who knows? So I'm behind this guy as we cross the tracks and begin to climb this steep hill. Despite it turning into 2 lanes on the hill, he's driving right up the middle of the 2 lanes. Figured he didn't realize it was 2 lanes, so I just putter along behind him, keeping my distance. As soon as he reaches the peak of the hill and the road begins to level out, he moves over to the right lane. Yes, finally. So I move over and begin to pass him. As soon as I get past the front of the truck, he swerves behind me quite abruptly and begins flashing his high beams at me. Usually when someone flashes their lights behind you, in our area anyway, that means turn on your lights, but mine were already on. I checked as soon as he started flashing at me. Weirded out, I put my blinker on and safely changed lanes to get out of his way. He follows my lane change and begins laying on his horn, honk after honk after honk. The honking startled me, and I began to get a lot more flustered. What the hell did this guy want? I moved out of his way. My headlights are on, so why didn't I just speed up and zip away, you may be asking? Well, I grew up in this area. It had been raining heavily all day long, and I know that the service road floods a little in heavy rain, both on the shoulders and in random spots in the middle of the lanes. It's a small Midwestern town. Our roads are crappy. I had already skidded and nearly wrecked once. I wasn't about to floor it on this bumpy service road that floods and risk wrecking again. There is nothing between the quarry and the highway, about 4 or 5 miles of wooded area. If I wrecked, it would have been just him and me. So this went on for the next 4 or 5 miles to the highway. He began tailgating me, in addition to the high beams and honking. Once the tailgating begins, I'm in tears. I don't know what this guy wants from me. I'm trying to stay out of his way and get home safely. That's all I wanted. I changed lanes 2 more times, making it 3 total. He followed me from lane to lane. As we approached the highway, I floored it. He couldn't accelerate quickly enough to keep up, and I lost him, finally. As soon as I realize I've lost him and I'm safe on the highway, I just lose it. I was a hysterical wreck. There's only one exit after getting on the highway to stop in the small town the highway runs through. After that, it's all wooded for a good 30 minutes. I thought about getting off at that exit just to calm down and pull it together, but I just wanted to go home, so I sped right past it. I should have stopped. Once the city was no longer visible in my rearview mirror, I was much more calm. I managed to scramble my cell out of my purse and put it in my lap just in case. The rain led up to a drizzle the further I went. I was still pretty on edge. There weren't many other cars on the highway, and the majority of them were truckers. I'm cruising along in the center lane when the truck next to me in the passing lane begins blaring their horn and moves into my lane, forcing me over to the third lane. He continued moving over, nearly forcing me off the highway. I sped up and changed lanes right in front of him so that I'm back in the center lane. I slow down so I'm in line with the front cab. I double-click the home button on my phone and roll down my window. I start taking pictures of the cabbie. I think the flashes made him realize what I was doing, and he began slowing down until he was behind me again. I got a lot of pictures. I sped up and lost sight of him behind me. I was satisfied I managed to get pics, but I'm just so angry at this point. I pull over onto the shoulder of the highway and wait for him. I just wanted to get behind him so I could get a pic of the license plate and report this asshole. Sadly, he was on to me, for sure. I noticed headlights behind me, a long ways back, but behind me nonetheless. On the shoulder of the highway, I waited, keeping an eye on the truckers passing me by, just to be sure I didn't miss him. I noticed a shadow pass through the headlights of the truck, which spooked me quite a bit. Did he get out of the cab? I didn't stick around to find out. I just took off and got home as quickly as possible. The pictures were a total failure. It was still drizzling. The flash combined with the drizzle just resulted in washing out the pictures. I could see the red cab, but no matter what filters I used, there was no making out exactly what the cab said.
Number 13. Okay, so this could have been nothing, but something about it felt so off. Some backstory. So last night, my sister, who lives 3 hours away from me, had somewhat of an emergency and asked if I would come stay the night with her. I packed my bags right away and headed there at 9 p.m. As I was about an hour away from my apartment, I realized that my car wasn't going to make it. The temp gauge was rising, and I didn't want to risk it overheating in the middle of nowhere. So I turn around, and when I'm about 15 minutes from home, my car overheats. At this point, it's about 11:30 p.m. I pulled off at an exit and waited for it to cool down, then got back on the highway, but it did it again. So I pulled off onto the side of the highway. As I'm waiting for it to cool down, I start to try it again, and it wouldn't start at all. I'm a 23-year-old female, all alone, new to town, and my boyfriend was out of town, so I start to panic a little, because I read too many damn Reddit stories. I managed to calm down and called my stepdad to let him know where I was and that I was going to call a tow truck. As I was on the phone with him, 2 cars pulled off the highway right in front of me, and then one right behind me. My first thought was that they were going to help me, or that they were all traveling together and needed to stop. But it was really weird to me that they pulled off at the same spot I did, with one pulling behind me. They all sat in their cars for what felt like forever, but was probably around 3 minutes. Then a man got out of one of the cars in front of me and started walking toward my car. He walked to my passenger side, stopped for 1 second, then walked to the car behind me. This whole time I'm describing what he looks like to my stepdad, just in case. He was then in that car for a while and walked back towards my car, and as he was passing my window, he hit it with his knuckle, knocking once as he kept walking. They then sat there for a while, and then all left at once. I'm realizing as I'm typing this that it doesn't seem that weird, but being alone on the highway with 3 cars pulled off in front of you and behind you is a suffocating feeling. And I really don't understand why he felt the need to knock on my window as he was walking by. I'm not going to lie, it made me cry because it was just so bizarre. I'm hoping they were just pulled off to talk to each other, and I was just overreacting. But I'll never really know.
Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's video. And big shout out to Stories After Midnight and Sir SpooksAlot for helping me out at last minute on this video. Be sure to check out their channels if you enjoyed their narration. And if you have your own personal scary story that you'd like to share with me for me to possibly narrate here on the channel, be sure to email it to me at southerncannibal@gmail.com. And before we bring this video to a close, I want to shout out all of my $5 or more patrons, as well as my $3 or more patrons featured on screen. So, big shout out to Babe Lincoln, Beth A, Kate E, Celeste S, Ellie S, Heather B, Howard R, Jacqueline W, Jazzy G, Jess, Jonathan C, Jonas B, Carrie F, Lori J, Lindsay S, Matthew B, Random Randy, Steph L, Tammy S, and Terry H. Thank you all so much for supporting me on Patreon. And if any of you would like to join these awesome people and also become a patron, head over to my Patreon at patreon.com/southerncannibal. Thanks everyone, and have a wonderful night. And remember to always stay away.